What is going on, guys? Welcome to Greggles TV. I have an awesome interview for you today with Harry McCracken, who is a tech journalist, and he has had the Microsoft Surface Duo in hand for weeks, I think almost a month at this point, and he has tons of questions that I was asking him, and he gave us answers, and he shows it off in the video. It's just a great interview. If you're really interested on this device, or you're curious about it, or you just want to know more about it overall, this is a great interview because we talk about a lot of stuff that hasn't been answered anywhere else. We even see the Surface Pen and maybe find out if it actually sticks to the device, aka is it magnetic or not. So let's check it out, enjoy the video, and leave comments down below. All right, guys, so welcome. We have a very, very special guest with us. We have Harry McCracken, and he is a journalist and tech editor at Fast Company. He also has his own newsletter, Technologia. There you go. I was saying it. I was trying to say it the whole time before the shot. It's like a tongue twister. Anyways, how's it going, Harry?
Really good. It's fun to be here.
Yes, awesome. I'm so glad you're here. So the reason I brought you on is you wrote an article about the Microsoft Surface Duo, and I saw that you did also a video interview like this over on Twit. So I guess let's start off with, why did Microsoft send you the device? Was it to get your feedback? Was it for a review? Like, what was the main reason for them sending you that device?
It was because I was doing this story, which was not quite a review, because the unit I got had fairly early software and it was rough around the edges. So I talked to Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, and Panos Panay, who's the kind of the father of Surface and the head of the hardware group at Microsoft. And because it's kind of a hard device to write about unless you've tried it, I was able to get a unit and spend about a week and a half with it before my story went live.
Uh-huh. That's awesome. So you have the device in hand, right? Could you hold it up just so we could see it?
There we go.
There it is. That's the back. Oh, very cool.
And it's
sorry. It's a little... There you go, two screens.
Screens. It has all kinds of orientations. You can use it like this, kind of like a book. You can then use it sort of like a mini laptop. You can fold it all the way around, so you have screens on the outside on both sides. You can do it like a little tent if you want to watch video on it.
That's cool. I love the different orientations. Speaking of, like, obviously I could see right there that it has that bumper to protect it. How do you feel? One of the when I pre-ordered mine, I didn't see any cases that I could pre-order. I haven't really looked on Amazon either. Maybe they have them on Amazon, but it does come with a bumper. How do you think the bumper works in terms of protecting the device overall? The
bumper seems pretty good. It's like very minimalist. It's thin. It adds very little bulk. There's kind of a grip on the, you probably can't quite really see, but there's sort of a grip that makes it easier to hold. I think you're less likely to have it slip out of your hands with the bumper on. It fastens on with adhesive. I took it on and off several times, but I think it's kind of designed to be on there more or less permanently rather than be something you put on and off all the time.
So do you think it doesn't need a case to, I mean, I know you haven't had it for that long, but do you think it would need a case, or do you think this would be enough protection for most people?
I think it's pretty comparable to a more conventional phone in that it depends on how paranoid you are. Hopefully there will be some third-party cases, including some that are a little more heavy-duty. There are some challenges with a case, so just because of the weight. In fact, it folds in so many orientations, and you couldn't like put a, the equivalent of an OtterBox probably, because it would be impossible to fold. But the bumper seems quite good overall. And also the device has Gorilla Glass front and back, so I did not attempt to test it to see whether it was drop proof. I did accidentally drop it a couple of times, and I asked Microsoft about it, and it feels like probably your level of paranoia should be similar to your level of paranoia for a more conventional phone. I guess the big question is the hinge and what happens if you drop it when it's partially open. And again, I didn't try to test this, but the hinge does feel pretty robust. So
that's good.
If you spend $1,400 on a device, you should be careful with that. But I'm not sure if you have to be radically more careful than you are with whatever you have now.
Exactly. So one of the big things is, like, there's no outside display. how did that affect your day-to-day usage? Because when you have a regular phone, you know, or you can't even see it, but when you have a regular phone, you have a display that will light up or has always on display. How did that feel for you to not have a display when it's closed up, or did you always have it open?
Well, it definitely impacts how you use this phone. I mean, you can use it, you can fold it back so you have screens front and back. So if you do that, then it's not radically different than a typical phone. If you close it up, though, it's kind of more like having a laptop where if your laptop is closed, you're not ready to go. You need to open it up. And when I talked to Panos from Microsoft, he kind of used that as a selling point, that if you don't want to be distracted, you can fold it up and you won't see notifications.
Yeah.
But in general, I feel like this is a better phone when you're sitting down and being productive than if you're walking around outside, in which case it is a little bit more labor probably to go from having it in your pocket to having it be usable.
Right. So the big selling point is that it is two displays. How did that, I don't, how many, I know you're in early, beta or pre-beta software, but percentage wise out of the apps that you used, what was the percentage of like apps that weren't Microsoft apps that would take advantage of those two displays and they would go across the screen? Was it a high percentage, a low percentage?
It was pretty darn close to zero. I tried a bunch of popular apps like Zoom and Flipboard, and I noticed that Google Docs worked surprisingly well because it put your list of files on one side and the document you're editing on the other. But I think that might have been more or less coincidence than them having optimized it for this particular device. Google is interested in dual screen devices in general, and so they might have designed with that in mind. But for the most part, all of the Microsoft apps that come pre-installed, you can span them across both screens, and it knows it's on two screens. And because there's this hinge in the middle, it would not really make sense for you to have like your Word document spanning both screens, because you have this really distracting barrier in the middle. So instead of doing that, they do things like they'll put the file list on one side and the document on the other, and that works quite well. And Microsoft is says it's going to work with third-party developers to let them do something similar. Hopefully they will. How many will do it just for one device, I'm not sure. But if two screen devices do start to take off as a category, companies might start to think about the experience on that kind of device. Making
it more compatible. So these questions are kind of all over the place. Sorry, but how did you find it? And I'm sorry.
Also, I mean, it's also really nice just to have two apps up at the same time, one on each screen. And because this device has a much larger screen than usual, even if you're just using it in portrait mode, you get a lot more document or whatever you're doing on each side. So you can have like Word in your web browser or Zoom and Evernote.
Right.
So the screens, and that works quite well too. That's pretty cool.
Right. So just even though it might not be compatible with it, just as one display, you can just have it next to each other and still use it. It doesn't. That's cool.
Yeah, it's spanning both screens where they have to think about it, and if they just stay on one large screen, that's also really convenient. They don't have to do anything in particular to support it.
That's cool. So how did you find? And you kind of already answered this, but I kind of wanted to go back to it. Using it just as a phone. Did you find it comfortable, not comfortable in terms of either? And when you did talk on the phone, did you close it up and hold it up to your ear? Did you use a headset, speakerphone, opened up? Like, how did you use it?
All of the above. In some cases, I did just hold it up. And, this is a really wide device. It's much wider than any standard phone. And the biggest issue I found was it's not actually, it fits in this pocket. I had another shirt where it did not fit in the pocket at all. But holding it up is all right. Working with headphones is fine. It has a decent speakerphone. So again, if the main thing you do on a phone is to use it as a phone, you have no need for this device at all. But it makes calls okay.
So that kind of answers my question. So it is too wide in terms of holding it like a traditional phone to be comfortable to hold it like that. Is that correct?
I found it to be okay. I mean, if I'm making dozens of calls a day and I don't want to use headphones, it might be an issue, but it's probably a little bit less of an issue than I expected. I think these days we're kind of used to enormous phones and holding them up.
Yeah. So I guess you kind of answered this question as well already, but it goes back to the dual screens, the two screens. Did you find that YouTube was able to take advantage and look okay across the one giant display?
No. Yeah, basically video, you don't want video to span both screens because the Hinge basically gives you like an obstructed view of the video. But that said, the individual screens are also way larger than typical smartphone screens. So YouTube just on one screen is a pretty good experience.
It is. So it's not, it gives you still a large, even just on one display, it still gives you a big enough, because it's like 4:3, right? The aspect ratio rather than, so it looks
much more,
okay.
It's like a little laptop screen, and
okay.
And it works quite well. It's not like something like the Galaxy Fold, where you can fill in both sides and have work decently.
Okay, so how did you, there's a vibration motor in there, right? Like, so like it vibrates or whatever. Did you notice that it was any good or worse than other phones that you used, or just about average?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, how did you feel like it was based off, other phones? Was it normal feeling or?
Yeah, I probably am not a connoisseur of vibration motors, but it did the job in terms of getting my attention when I needed.
Okay, that's fine. I'm the same way. Some of these questions are from my fans that they wanted to know. So did you
like when the phone rang or whatever, and the vibration seemed fine.
That's good. So did you use because it is supported with the Surface Pens? Did you use a Surface Pen, and how was that experience?
Yeah, so it's compatible with the existing Surface Pens, such as this one, which is the Slim Pen, and those were designed for other Surface devices, which are much larger. It's not like the Galaxy Note, where they give you a pen. This does not come with a pen at all. And the Galaxy Note pen is small, and you can stick it inside your phone. And so with this, I'd say the pen experience is in some ways better than usual for a phone, just because you have a wider surface, and so writing is a little bit easier. One thing about even most large screen smartphones is they're quite narrow. A lot of the largeness is height, which is not great for writing. And with this device, you get more width, which I think is generally good for note taking. I'm not a super note taker on digital devices myself, but I tried a little bit. It comes with Microsoft OneNote, which has been nicely optimized for the device. But you do have to buy the pen separately, and you do need to figure out where you're going to put it when you're not using it.
Yeah, because unless they come out with some kind of case, there's no place to keep it. It doesn't magnetically stick or anything like that.
These pens are just kind of too big to do. Probably.
That's funny.
And actually, I just noticed the pen does stick to it. I'm not sure.
Oh, it does. Or not. Oh, okay. Look we broke news right here. Very cool. So we saw him dragging and dropping with, at least I did, in this 35-minute unveiling of the device within OneNote. Did you notice that you can drag and drop text or other things within other apps?
That's another thing, which I guess Android does have drag and drop, and has for a while, but basically developers haven't really used it because there were not a lot of use case scenarios. But Microsoft has embraced that, and the Microsoft apps do that. And that's another thing where if you have one app on both screens, being able to drag and drop between them is quite handy. But it's something that third-party developers will need to care about enough to implement before it works.
So one of the, I can't remember if I think you said this in your written review, but I thought I remember seeing it in your review with Twit, where you said the speaker does sound tinny. It's a mono speaker. Is it loud? Is it I know it's tinny, but is it loud, and is it passable?
Yeah, I mean, it's loud enough. It's mono. Other premium smartphones have been devoting a fair amount of attention to doing stuff like stereo and being optimized for music. I think that, I mean, in a lot of ways, Microsoft kind of ignored all the other things that other phones are competing on. Like, other phones have a bunch of cameras, and they have NFC, so you can do payments, and they have wireless charging, and they're competing on audio quality. And Microsoft really designed this for productivity. In terms of the camera, it works well for front-facing video conferencing. And the speaker, I think, is okay for for meetings, but it's not optimized for listening to music.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So the camera, I know it's not complete software, but I know the camera is not a huge selling point for this device. I remember you saying it was, good for, video conferencing, but like taking photos and videos, does it have portrait mode and, getting that blurred background? Does it have?
Yeah, it has most of that stuff. It has portrait mode. I think it has panorama. Just in terms of the software functionality, it has a bunch of the things you kind of expect these days. The issue is that, again, they didn't like put a camera on the front and 3 cameras on the back. They have 1 camera, and it's a little bit cumbersome. You can flip it around and basically use 1 screen and have the camera be on the other side. But at least with the software I have, that's a little bit clunky, and it's an 11 megapixel camera. And I did not attempt to do like a serious comparison of this with other devices for image quality. But I'd say my biggest stumbling block in terms of if I were thinking about buying this would be, I really like to use my phone as a camera, and that's not what they optimize this device for.
Okay. Screen quality, screen brightness. How did you? Was that all? Is the screen quality good? It is an OLED displays.
OLED. Yeah. Again, I didn't do like a methodical comparison.
Yeah,
but it was good. It was good enough. I did not notice any issues. I did quite a bit of stuff involving, using Word documents and PowerPoints on these screens, and it seemed quite good for that.
Good. And then to finish up a couple of things. So performance, again, I know you're not on final software, but a lot of people are concerned it has a Snapdragon 855, which is a processor from last year that was a premium processor, and only 6 gigs of RAM, which today you see a lot of premium phones with 12 gigabytes of RAM. Did you notice, and again, I know it's early software, but like just day-to-day usage, did you notice that it had trouble keeping up with just being a competent, phone or tablet, however you use it?
It did in some cases seem a bit sluggish, but based on all the devices I've ever reviewed over the years with pre-release software, it's also possible that that's because it was early software and it doesn't relate so much to the processor or the amount of RAM. So that's something where I'm really curious what they'll ship, because I just remember all these other products where the software was slow, and by the time they shipped it, it was quite a bit snappier.
That's good. So battery life, I know it's pre-release software, but did you notice that the battery life is okay? Because it is kind of a smaller battery versus what we're seeing with other phones in today.
Yeah, I basically went to do more serious testing before I came to any conclusions. It does feel like the use case scenario with this is a little bit different, and it's like I say, it's something that's good if you're sitting around working with documents rather than running around on the street, and it's conceivable that kind of will affect your ability to charge throughout the day. I can kind of see this as being something you use at your desk more often, where you're able to plug in. But I would love to get the real device and go out for like a busy day out on the road or traveling and see how it does.
That's good. So just to finish up, who do you think the device is best suited for if someone's going to buy it? Like, based off how what you know about it thus far?
I mean, I think it is kind of best for the people that Microsoft says they're targeting, which is people who love Surface as a line of devices, and B, people who live in Microsoft apps. So they've already done lots of work to optimize Office and Outlook and OneNote and so forth. They already work quite well on the screen. If you, on the other hand, are like a Google Docs person or somebody who uses Zoom, those apps have not been optimized yet, and you get less out of the 2 screens, and you don't get the ability to span both of them. So yeah, I think it really is for people who are excited about this form factor, use Microsoft a lot, want to kind of be on the leading edge, and are able to splurge on this. This is not more expensive than the highest end Apple devices or Samsung devices, unlike a lot of folding screen devices, which are way more expensive. But when all is said and done, this is a $1,400 phone, and there are not going to be millions and millions of people who are going to buy it. It's really somewhat of a niche product, but it's a niche that Microsoft cares about a lot. And they also say their goal is to sort of get people thinking about 2 screens in general. With the original Surface tablet, they wanted the Windows laptop market to think more about devices that two-in-one devices and devices where you could take off the keyboard, and they kind of were successful. After Surface came out, a lot of other devices were inspired by it, and even the iPad Pro drew inspiration from it. So I think this device makes a lot more sense if it is kind of kickstarting the two-screen pocket-sized form factor than if it's just like a single device.
And I think you kind of answered the last question, but do you think the price is fair at, $13.99, $14.99, depending upon the storage size you choose? Do you think it's a fair price for what the device is thus far and what you know about it?
I'm curious to see what people who are candidates to buy this think. I mean, I think it's kind of on the high end of fair. There are people out there who spend this much on a phone. There are also people who spend this much on somewhat larger computing devices. The other big question is how many people will be happy using this as their only phone. Again, if you like stuff like a great camera and wireless charging and Google Pay, you're not going to get this as your only phone. You might conceivably use it, but not as your primary phone. But then you end up with a phone that might cost quite a bit and this device. So I am very curious to see how this does. It probably does. It does not. They're not trying to compete with Apple or Samsung, which they can't. But I'm curious to see whether they sell enough of them to kind of live up to their expectations. And again, whether we see, a Surface Duo 2. I could certainly see a Surface Duo 2 where the cameras are a bit better and it has more mainstream appeal.
Before we go, can we just have one last look at the Surface Duo? Actually,
sure. It's white. It only comes in one color. Which is white. It's kind of blinding white, as you can see. But,
so that's the camera. Where you're on the left, that's the camera.
Yeah, this is. There's the camera. Again, kind of typical for what you would expect. Front-facing video. But you can also flip it around, and I could be like shooting a picture from this side here. But it is kind of cumbersome. I would not want to whip it out of my pocket and take photographs. I think it's going to be slower than most other phones for that.
Well, Harry, thanks so much. I very much appreciate you coming on, and it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Anytime. My pleasure too.
So if you want to know anything else about Harry, have it be signing up for his tech newsletter or reading his article on the Microsoft Surface Duo, or even just to follow him on Twitter, I'll link all of that stuff in the description down below. Again, Harry, thank you so much for being on the show. Super appreciate it. And we'll see you guys in the next one.